Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is to help you create an ecosystem of academic excellence through inspiring conversations, practical strategies, and actionable insights. We empower educators, leaders, and change makers just like yourself to foster trust, collaboration, and academic excellence, and provide you with the resources that you need to ultimately succeed and thrive as an educational leader. If I was to ask you the question of what does a pair of earrings, a Nutter Butter, a test, and two boxers have in common, what would you say? The real answer is absolutely nothing. And this is a part of a training that I did a little while ago for a group of educators. And the idea of the training is, how do we engineer the art of excellence? And not just in our classrooms as educators, but in our schools as we think about building a contagious while also collaborative culture, where we're designing environments for students and teachers and parents and all of the stakeholders of this institution to ultimately thrive. And why we gave that example at the beginning of the presentation is of a Nutter Butter, two boxers, a pair of earrings, and a test, because that's oftentimes how our classrooms look at the beginning of the year. We all may be in the same class, but we may have a multitude of diverse personalities, learning styles, interests, focus, things that would best represent us, values, abilities to communicate or deal with conflict, various things that are going on with our students socially, academically, intellectually, mentally, and all of these various factors that potentially pull us apart as students and can potentially create chaos within our classrooms. But the goal of an absolutely phenomenal leader, the goal of a educator, not just a teacher, but an educator that can bridge these students together, find the commonalities, and be able to work inclusively, that is what contagious culture looks like in designing an environment for students to ultimately thrive. And the first step that I would tell you to do is it would have to start with heart. Oftentimes, we come into these spaces, and I am talking to me even in this moment. When I initially started teaching, I had all of these bias, all of these thoughts, and frankly, judgments about the type of experience that I would have with my students in the classroom. I didn't go the traditional route. I didn't just go to a 4-year institution for elementary education or some form of an educational track and then go do my student teaching, take my praxis, and then started fresh within some type of district school. I went to industry. I worked for Johnson & Johnson. I built a company. I published multiple books and spoke on multiple stages. I was a board member. I served as an administrator before I actually taught as a dean of students at a charter-based school. So all of these things and all of these experiences shaped, I believe, a lot of the bias, but then also a sense of arrogance before I walked into the classroom, because I knew that because I had all of these experiences and all of these things that I did that prepared me for teaching, that I would be able to connect with students immediately. I would be able to understand how to differentiate and blend learning and empower students and enforce rules and all of these things easily, because I just knew if I could do it on major stages, if I could do it with adult learners, if I could do it online with digital courses, if I could do it as an administrator and navigating relationships with students and parents and drive initiatives as a board member, then it would be easy for me to do it as an educator. And was I wrong? I was absolutely lost. And one of the best decisions that I could have made as a leader is to step out of a leadership position and go back to teach. Because one of the things that I had to realize is that teaching is tough. And it is one of the most rewarding careers that I've ever had. And that's why I even deem myself to always be a teacher. And teaching people, adults, is fun, and it is exciting, and it is absolutely an amazing experience. But teaching students is the most rewarding work, the most rewarding work I can ever say that I've ever stepped into. And my hat goes off to all of the educators out there that are listening to this podcast, but that are always committed and still committed to being able to perfect their craft, to be able to give back to students, and to be able to not only educate young minds, but empower and equip them with the skills necessary that they need to be globally competitive leaders of the future. So this episode is geared towards helping educators approach their classrooms. Now, there's many educators that will listen to this and will have a multitude of experience and will have even more experience than I have in teaching and in education. So my goal is not that this is the law and you should just do this, but these are some nuggets and tools that you could add to your toolbox, that you can add to your repertoire. This episode may be a refresher for many of the educators that listen to this episode. And if you are a new educator, if you are a new teacher, if you are new to the craft or still learning, then this episode, I want you to take notes, and after, like, subscribe, share, and potentially ask some questions in the comment section below. And I want to be able to help you throughout your journey as well. All right. So when I think about the first step of engineering the art of excellence, we have to first understand, before we even get to a model of being able to do this, and we've created a model for this episode that I would recommend that you use. But before we even get to that, it's important as educators that we empower students, not enforce rules. What that looks like is, I recognize when we first start our school year, we always hear from educators and administrators and leaders and former educators you have to lay the hammer, and you have to lay the hammer the first few weeks, and you have to let kids know who you are and the rules and all of these various things. And I understand the concept, but I disagree with what it looks like most times in practice. I believe that relationships are built and forged through identifying commonalities, building trust, definitely communicating boundaries, setting expectation. But the consistency of communication, the consistency of those various things is important. I also believe, though, that students want a teacher that they love, that they care about, but that also cares about them as students, that sees them, that values their contribution, their input as well. Not them coming into a class that is Miss Johnson's class, but Miss Johnson being able to come down to the level of the students and welcoming these students in and helping them understand that this is our class. Miss Johnson's just facilitating, not saying that this is Dr. King's class and you need to do X, Y, Z. But Dr. King has an ability to be able to work with these students and say, hey, what does classroom design look like? What are some things that you all would want up on the wall to even help you get through these lessons, or that you can go back to when we're covering various things, or things that represent you all as students? Are there any artists? Are there any designers? Are there any poets in here that we can feature you all's work? How can I empower students in my classroom, even in the designing of my classroom? When I think about classroom procedures and expectations and essentially rules, how can I include my students in these processes? How can one of the methods that I used when I was teaching is I included students in the consequences. So here's my expectation. Class, if we don't meet this expectation, what are the consequences that you all deem? 1, 2, 3, what are the point system? What are the methods? What are the metrics that we're going to use to hold individual students accountable, but then also the class accountable to ensuring that we're meeting and exceeding the standard that we set as a class? That way, there's immediate buy-in. And I talk about this in my newest book, Contagious Culture, Creating an Ecosystem of Academic Excellence. How can I not just tell students what to do, how can I get students to own that this classroom is also yours and create ownership and create buy-in? So how do I empower students rather than just enforce rules? What this looks like in practice, just 3 quick nuggets that you can write down, is we have to incentivize assignments to increase student engagement and participation. Now, I recognize there's data out there that shows that incentivizing students is not the way to go, and we have to create intrinsic and internal motivators rather than motivating them to just do things because there's going to be a prize or a gift or some form of an award at the end. I agree. I also do agree as a father that there's sometimes that students need to be motivated to do something before we can be able to create and design a culture of internal motivators. 90% of our students may not come in on day one excited to learn, joyful, fulfilled, confident, empowered, and all of these various things. So what can we do at the beginning to incentivize this activity, or to incentivize character, or to incentivize integrity, or to incentivize, so then it becomes habits, then it becomes embedded in the DNA of our students. Number 2, I want you to stop teaching. And I know that sounds crazy, but I want you to stop teaching and start to inspire. Students, I want you to ultimately empower students to hold themselves and others accountable to not just do the work, but to make positive choices. Not to just do the work, but to be integral. Not to just do the work, but to be mindful of what they communicate. One of the most beautiful things that I remembered from when I was teaching in the classroom, 8th grade ELA, is how once you build relationships and once your classroom has contagious culture embedded in the DNA, students will begin to stand up and enforce the rules without the teacher even communicating that. So there may be times where I may be in the middle of a lesson. I may be in the middle of giving a mini lesson, or the students may be in individual practice, and there may be other students goofing off or talking or standing up. And at the point where now other students are encouraged to communicate to that student, hey, this is the expectation. We don't want to have this happen. Or, hey, we're working towards this. Hey, we only have 7 more minutes of this. Hey, I need you to get back on track. Once you begin to have peer-to-peer accountability, you know that now we've empowered students to have a contagious culture, and we're not just enforcing rules. At the point where you can actually become the facilitator and the guide in the classroom, rather than having to always say stop talking or get on the microphone and ask for an administrator, when you can create an environment where peer-to-peer accountability is existent, you know you're on the right track as an educator. And then number 3, improve outcomes and educational opportunities. And what this looks like is expose students to new opportunities, whether this is providing them the opportunity to intern, whether this is providing them field trips, whether this is bringing in individuals into your classroom to expose them to new career fields, whether this is embedding various instructional material into your lessons to expose them to various opportunities, or have them fill out a specific piece of paper to teach them, or checks, or how to teach them how to file taxes, or whatever the case may be. How can we expose them outside of just teaching them curriculum material? All right. One of the greatest things that I believe has happened in the 21st century is the adoption of STEM education: science, technology, engineering, and math. And now it's STEAM when we look at the art of math. And I believe that we can find STEM and even STEAM, the art component, in everything that we do as individuals. There's a science to it. There's some form of technology to it. There's an engineering and creation process to it. There's an art, of course, aspect to it, and a design aspect to it. But then there's also math in everything. So what we're going to talk about today is how to be successful as educators, how to engineer this art of excellence in your classroom through using a STEAM approach. And The STEAM acronym stands for, number one, the science of quality instruction. Number two, let go of the tech crutches. Number three is engineering student leadership. Number four is the art of connectivity. And then number five is mathematical mindset. As we introduce the science of quality instruction, there's a quote that just spoke to me as we were preparing this presentation, that science is about the process. It's not about the conclusion. The same thing is true when we're approaching classroom instruction. It's about the process of students growing, the process of students learning, the process of students becoming, rather than the A, the B, the C, the D on the test. Now, I do believe that grades are a pretty good indicator for where our students are, but the becoming process, the growth process, the development of our students is much more important. There's three key components when we look at the science of quality instruction. Number one is pace matters. Number two is engagement plus excitement equals actual education. And then number three, relationships, relationships, relationships. Number one, when we think of pace matters, it's lesson planning, not lazy planning. So it's important that we pick up our pace and not singing a lullaby to our students and getting them to go to sleep. One of the challenges that one of the ways that I would challenge educators anytime that I train is that if students are sleeping in your classroom, it's probably your fault. If students are on their phones in your classroom, it's probably your fault. To this day, I have students calling me in the middle of class while they're in high school. Now, there's been times where I've answered and I didn't know that they were in class, but there's been times where I have not answered, of course. And then they texted me and said, "Hey, Mr. King, we're in class. This is boring." One of the challenges that I want to get you to understand is that you're the DJ of your classroom. And if you go to a party, like most of us have, whether it's a wedding, a DJ, an event, the DJ sets the tone and creates the ultimate environment for your classroom. So if your students are goofing off, it's probably your lesson planning. If your students are on their phone again, then it's probably your lesson planning. If your students are walking around not doing what they're supposed to do, it's probably in your lesson planning. And one of the things that we would do that was sharp is that I would have timers on my Google Slides so that students knew what was coming, how much time that you had, but then it also kept me on pace. What that would look like is if I knew there was a 5-minute transition period and I wanted my students working on this specific assignment when they came in for warm up, then I would put a 12-minute timer on. So that gave them time to transition, but that also understood that, hey, if you get in here late or if you get in here at the bell, that means you only have 7 minutes. But the 7 minutes is counting down. And I say, hey, we have 7 minutes to this. We have 4 minutes left. We have 3 minutes. And then I'm communicating to the students what's coming next, but then also creating a sense of urgency for you to stay on task. So the pace matters. So we would have a warm up. We would introduce objective. We would then introduce some form of recap of our last lesson. Then we would have mini lesson. We would have guided practice. Then we would have breaking up the students into groups. Okay. So let's say 7 minutes for this, 20 minutes for this, 13 minutes for this, 8 minutes for this. So I would say just a quick hack is put a timer on your slides so that you can stay on track, but then also your students can stay on track as well. When I think of engagement plus excitement equals education, how do you make your students feel? Because that's critical. And it starts at the foundation. If your students don't care about what you're talking about, then how can you embed certain things that they do care about into your lessons? If you're teaching ELA and you're trying to teach a specific component of ELA, can you look at potential rap lyrics and break that down and teach the components of what you're trying to teach and then break down rap lyrics so that they can understand and they can engage with it? And this is Black and brown students, of course. If there's another group of students that you work with, how can you identify what they already engage with? Let's say a social media post. If we're in math, can we look at our algorithm for TikTok? Like, how can you connect it to what you're already doing to introduce a topic, to get them to care about it and connect to it, and then go back to what you're supposed to be talking through so that you can continue to keep the students engaged, excited about the specific content that these students are learning, so that then they can be able to receive the education that they're there to receive. Pace matters, get students engaged, and then relationships. I want you to know more about, or I want you to get to know more about your students' future, more than just where they are in the present. That way, we use this as an accountability tool. If I know you want to be a doctor, or you say you want to be a doctor, I know you want to be, like, there's always one student in your class that wants to be a professional player, then I'm going to connect your behavior to that doctor. If you say that you forgot to do your homework and you were busy, I then ask that student, Jermaine, well, if you forgot to do a specific tying of an organ during surgery, what do you think would happen because you were tired in the middle of surgery? If you forgot to come to practice because you were caught up the day before, do you think that you would be on the field on Saturday? And just continue to remind them, you say you want to do this, but your decisions, your habits, your behavior are going to ultimately show me if this is actually what you desire to do, or if you're just giving lip service. So connect that back to those students. And in the first step, again, understand the science of quality instruction. Number two, I recognize that technology is in everything. And we as educators have to let go ultimately of the tech crutches. Tech was supposed to be a tool and a resource, not a replacement. The teacher is still the most important piece to the puzzle in our classrooms. The student's voice is still the most important piece to the puzzle. So we have to understand how to integrate technology with fidelity, reaching students where they are, integrating it into instruction. It's not all about computers and iPads and Chromebooks. It's about how do you understand how to get students to critically think, process information, leverage some of these tools on the computer to enhance their education, not to replace their education. There's a quote that I read by the National Educational Technology Standards for Students, International Society for Technology and Education, and it said effective integration of technology is achieved when students are able to select technology tools to help them obtain information in a timely manner, analyze and synthesize the information, and present it professionally. The technology should become an integral part of how the classroom functions, as accessible as all other classroom tools. Tools, not teachers. Stop just giving and creating assignments on your computer, on your online platforms, and you walking around the classroom for 50 to 90 minutes checking on those assignments from your desk or from behind computer screens. Your job is to educate, to equip, to empower. And I recognize technology is necessary and it's useful and it's a part of our day-to-day life. But how can you be the educator that doesn't even need technology to be able to enhance and grow and equip and empower and educate their students? Something to consider. Number three, how do we engineer student leadership in the classroom? This is by far one of my favorite topics to talk about. And when discipline falls apart, take a look at your curriculum and instruction. I'm going to say it again. When discipline falls apart, take a look at your curriculum and your instruction. How do we empower collaboration and student accountability? This is something that we talked about the science of quality instruction and empowering students, not just teaching them, okay? So how can we empower collaboration and student accountability in the classroom? How do we establish positive peer-to-peer pressure? And this is all about culture. How do we establish this? How do we get students to identify when there's an issue, self-correct, empower them to share out while also giving other opportunities to other students to self-correct on their own as well? We're not just teaching leadership in classrooms. I know there's leadership courses. I know there's leadership curriculums out there and leadership books. We're not teaching leadership. We're modeling what leadership looks like. And as an educator, it's your responsibility to model what that looks like on a day-to-day basis in your interactions, in your preparation, and how you show up, and how you deliver your content, and how you deal with conflict, and how you communicate with your students, and how you communicate with your peers. All of this is important. It's about teaching students positive consequences and positive choices versus negative choices and negative consequences. Leaders can see possibilities, whereas managers see what it is. How can you not just see the possibilities in your students, but also teach the students how to see the possibilities in themselves? This is what student leadership looks like. Let's get to the next one. The art of connectivity. One of the quotes that I mentioned when I was delivering this presentation is, when you give students a choice in the classroom, you give students a chance to succeed in life. I believe choice is paramount, not just in parenting, but then also in educational development of students as well. I talked a little bit earlier about providing students the choice to be a part of the rules and the procedures of your class, giving students the choice to help in the designing or the decorating of your classroom, giving students potentially even the choice of choosing the day that the test or the quiz will be given to give them time to prepare. Even little things at home that I would do with my own son as he was growing up is I would put 2 outfits out. You're still having some order with the outfits rather than just having high polka dot socks, some zebra shorts, and a tank top in the middle of the winter. Like, I may have a blue sweatsuit and a green sweatsuit. Now, over time, it's teaching choice. Okay, I'm going to give you the opportunity to choose. Then over time, he chooses his own outfits, or you may have to shift some things around. How can we show this up? How can this show up in our classrooms? This is one thing that I want you to look at. It's the why, the who, and the where. I want you to first understand how to visualize the picture. This is the why. Establish the purpose of your students. Then I want you to ask your students, what do you want students to accomplish? Like, what do students want to accomplish in your class? And then I want you to think about, as you answer that question, well, what type of educator do I need to be in order for my students to accomplish those various things? Then I want you to prepare the canvas so that we can begin to create these colorful experiences in our classroom. Student success ultimately is determined by close classroom culture. And the energy you bring is the culture you create, the experiences that you bring, the opportunities of exposure that you expose your students to is the culture that you create. So what tone are you setting? What tone are you setting when you keep pushing back a test because you're not prepared to give it? What tone are you setting when you get so frustrated with your students that you just give them busy work because you weren't prepared to navigate some of the questions that they had? What tone are you setting when you're out of dress code, or you're coming late, or you're giving one student specific consequences versus another, and they're completely different because of your own bias or inability to navigate your own emotions? The why is important when we're establishing purpose. The who is important because this allows us to create an environment that works for our children. But the where is important as well. I want you to establish a winning environment for your students. And this requires us to think with the student in mind. This requires us to minimize necessary distractions. This requires us to ask the question of what will work best for my students. When we're thinking about the art of connectivity, when you give a student a choice and when you offer an opportunity to connect, this provides the chance for students to succeed, not only in your class, but in life. And as we continue to evolve this point, or just grow or expand this point, when we talk about blended learning, you can't blend colors with only one painting instrument. You can't blend instruction with only one educational resource. You can't empower and differentiate instruction by using one method or style. It's important that you switch it up. We're painting masterpieces, people. We are painting masterpieces. So layering is important, supplemental success is important. Okay. And what this looks like is just start teaching, like just teach, because through your process, you will be able to grow. But I think a lot of times we get so caught up in the perfect lesson plan and the perfect slides and all of these various things. What experiences are you creating for your students and what makes your style effective? Ask the kids. One of the things that I would do as an educator is I would ask the students on Friday, hey, what are the things that you wish you could have learned differently this week? Where can I improve as an educator, as your teacher? And what do you need to see with me or from me? That way, it allowed me to be reflective. That way, it allowed me to be able to understand what my children need so that I could show up best for my students. Then layering. When you think of layering, you can't erase a canvas. You layer, you put different things on, and you just go through this process. No canvas is ever done, and no student is ever unteachable. It's not the lack of materials that students have. It's not the lack of drive. It's not the lack of success or the lack of DNA or whatever it is that we've, deemed or how we've labeled these children. It's you. And are you being the teacher that you needed when you were younger? Are you actually the teacher that these children need? And if you're not, then grow. And if you don't want to grow and if you don't want to commit to the process, then you need to get out of the way and allow someone in that actually cares, that wants to be here, that wants to commit to these processes, that's not going to let their bias serve as hurdles and barriers for these students. Let that person in place to be able to empower these children. And then when we think about the importance of just painting and layering and how that's key component to your success as an educator, but also your student successes as students, your curriculum is not enough. And the truth is, you are not enough. You have to figure out who can be a part of your village to be able to help you get to this next level. I may have had all of these credentials. I may have come in with all of these things, but there were mentors, there were coaches, there were other students, there were other educators that I needed to continue to perfect and grow my craft. We cannot be so arrogant and so educated to believe that we can't still grow and become lifelong educators, that we can't be coached, that we can't be corrected, that we can't be mentored. So where can you grow your craft for your students? Where can you improve? Where can you develop? And who are the people in your circle of educators or in your sphere of influence that can lead to you becoming the best possible educator that you can be? There's another quote when we think about mathematical mindset. What is mathematics? It's only a systematic effort of solving problems or puzzles postured, imposed by nature. This is the same approach when we look at education. It's mindset, engagement, and the opportunity to plug before you tap out. Growth mindset is necessary, and that's expanding on the point that we just mentioned. When you're encouraging student success, you're providing students the chance to win because you're so focused on becoming the absolute best that you can be for your children, where students see you learning, so they want to learn. Students see you growing, so they want to grow. Students see you getting coached and mentored, so they feel comfortable with you, with them asking questions, versus a fixed mindset of this idea of gifted or only giving praise to certain students, or not getting students to believe that failure is okay. Mindset is super important to how you're approaching not only your craft as an educator, but also the culture that you're creating within your classroom. Mathematical mindset looks like, how do we create engagement by creating realistic problems and then teaching students how to break their own ceilings that they have within their own lives. Mathematical mindset looks like, where are you plugging in before you tap out as an educator? Because without vision, even the most focused, passionate battery cannot work. Without vision, even the most focused passion is a battery without a device. As educators, we have to understand 4 questions. And there's 4 questions I want you to consider. How can you expand learning outside of your classroom? By engaging in personal and professional developmental opportunities that are ultimately going to help you become better for your students. Number 2, how can you equip students with the resources and skills necessary to become globally competitive leaders of the future? Number 3, how can you inspire students to becoming more accountable and responsible for their actions? And number 4, how can you begin to align your expectations as a teacher, as a leader, with your expectations as a person to remain balanced, full, and charged up? When we think about engineering the art of excellence within our classrooms and within our school communities, it starts with the science of quality instruction. We continue to grow it and understand it's important to let go of the tech crutches. This allows us to engineer student leadership by having the art of connectivity. And if we do all of this, we create a mathematical mindset. My name is Kyle King. I'm the host of the Contagious Culture podcast, and I thank you for joining us today. Ask yourself this one question this week. What kind of culture am I spreading? Culture is everywhere and in anything. Make yours worth catching. We'll see you next time.